Last Thursday, when Venerable Children was teaching on Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, she gave us some homework. And the homework was to meditate on the 3 kinds of laziness that are obstacles to our joyous effort. The 3 kinds are the laziness of procrastination or indolence, just plain old laziness. What she calls the laziness of the busiest of the busy. The ignoble activities is what Lama Tsongkhapa calls it, this kind of laziness that's engaged in all kinds of worldly concerns, but not our Dharma practice. And the third one is the laziness of discouragement. And she emphasized that that would be the one that we would meditate on the most. She said do all 3, but especially on discouragement, because those were the verses that we were looking at. And this one is a devious thought. And I thought about it. It brought up again another story for me about working with this laziness of discouragement that I thought would be useful to share today. Here are the verses in chapter 7 of Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Verse 17, I should never indulge in despondency by entertaining such thoughts as, how shall I ever awaken? Now, has anybody here ever had that thought? Has anyone here never had that thought? Really? How shall I ever awaken? That's why Venerable Children is the teacher and I am not. She assumes you practice the path. She assumes that you practice the path and follow the teachings and you become Buddha. That is not an assumption that came to me easily, or maybe even comes to me easily yet, I have to say. I'm still working with this. The rest of this verse is, for the Tathagatas who speak what is true have uttered this truth. If they develop the strength of their exertion, even those who are flies, mosquitoes, bees, and insects will win the unsurpassable awakening which is so hard to find. And Venerable Children identified that if we believe the Buddha, then we believe this quote, and apparently she does easily, and the rest, and that's why she's the teacher and I'm not. But I want to talk about how I have worked with coming to that. I mean, in her talk, she also identified 3 things that become the obstacles to our developing our joyous effort, and that is this kind of pitiful thought: the goal is too high. The path is too hard, and I will say too long. And the third one is there's something wrong with me. I'm defective. I can never do it myself. And I think it's kind of self-evident what each of these are. You know, the path is too high, Buddhahood, imagine loving every single living being at the same time, staying in meditative concentration on the nature of reality and spontaneously generating body after body after body to be able to benefit sentient beings, really. That's high. That's a high goal. And, you know, looking at the bodhisattva deeds of what they have to do and even being able to give their body, and they start emanating bodies too, you know, and they give themselves up and they give your body to the tiger. And at the same time, you're also trying to love every single living being, no matter what they do to you. And besides, it takes 3 countless great eons. Now, that sounds hard to a lazy person like me. And then third, you know, there's something wrong with me. You can listen to this verse. Even the Buddha says, even flies, mosquitoes, bees, and insects can do it, but not me. Right? That is really a big sign of the discouragement, of the laziness of discouragement, and it is a lie. But what I've discovered in working with this is that this laziness of discouragement is very much attached to arrogance. And here's why. I want to tell you a story. Many years ago now, and early in my Dharma practice, I was experiencing a big loss of my life. Grief, pain, struggle. And Venerable Robina happened to be at the Dharma Center in Seattle at that time, Venerable Robina Korten, quite a few times during that particular period. And I remember one time, I was really working to apply the Dharma. I was meditating on attachment, had Venerable's outline on taking the ache out of attachment, which I still hand out to people liberally. It's got so many different ways of working with the attachment. And I was practicing it a lot. But one day I was complaining to Venerable Robina and said, you know, I can sit down and I can do this meditation and I can see, yes, things are impermanent and nothing lasts. And I'm fine, and then I stand up and I'm a mess again. And Rabina said, she's so direct if you know her. I'll never forget this. She took her hand and she said, "Have some humility." And I was like, what? Have some humility. She said, "You have been wandering in cyclic existence, attached to living beings for endless, beginningless time. You think a few meditations on attachment is going to take this away from you?" Oh. That has been such a guideline for me throughout the rest of my years of practice. Have some humility, which boils down to, I think, two things. One is this idea that, if you think you're kind of a special person, from the beginning, there's this idea that I heard the Dharma. It's like, oh, the Dharma makes so much sense. I should already know this. I should have already figured this out. Well, I haven't, and I don't, and even to this day, I haven't and I don't. But that thought that I should already know how to do this came very easily at the beginning. Now, many years later, the second chapter is, I've been practicing this so long, I should be further along by now. Or I should be better at this by now. Or I should have this affliction under control by now. So that's one big piece of arrogance, actually. And the other one is, from the beginning, when I apply the antidotes, they should work. Press button, take the pill, I applied the antidote, I did the meditation, what's wrong with the path, as well as what's wrong with me? Have some humility. So there's two things in there. One is if you hear this word should, I should. There's a psychologist talk about these should statements. It's very interesting. Should statements are a common negative thinking pattern or a cognitive distortion that can contribute to feelings of fear and worry. They also put unreasonable demands and pressure on ourselves, which make us feel guilty and like we've failed. So as long as we have this should thinking in our mind as a habit, we're trying to change reality. Every single time I try to catch myself with should, and it's very much a habit still in my mind, but it's like, if I think I should be better, or you should be better, or things should be this way, then that immediately to me is a signal that I'm fighting with reality. It's not. And then when we look at this idea of discouragement, or this laziness of discouragement, the should also then has some reflection that I should be something that I am clearly not. So setting up these expectations is this sense of arrogance, really? Whereas accepting that where I am, who I am, how I am, is okay, is enough, that's its own practice, this practice of radical acceptance, which isn't on any of the lists, but is sort of, what's the word? The subtext of many, many, many of the practices that we do to accept ourselves where we are, how we are. As long as we think we're further along than we are, we're not able to practice because we're regretting that we're not, or we're trying to pretend that we are, or this whole array of things is coming out to scramble the surface, when underneath we're just feeling lost and confused because we've expected ourselves to be something that we're not. It wastes so much time. It wastes so much energy, let me tell you. I know that. The other thing that's true about this kind of arrogance is that it assumes that there is an independent, substantially existent person who has control over the aggregates and can just will them to stop any certain kind of behavior, and then I'll be fine. There is no teaching that says that that's how you practice the path. Zero. But, clinging to this idea that I should just be able to fix things, well, it feeds the discouragement in the mind of the practice. So The antidote, of course, what we hear over and over again is to meditate on Buddha nature. For me, however, the antidote before I can meditate on Buddha nature is to have developed a deep conviction in cause and result, independent arising. Because it's really clear, and Venerable said this in the teaching, if you practice slowly, meditate on the gradual path, do the merit-making practices, do the purification practice, then we create the causes for the long-term goal. In business, they call this chunking it up. So you take little steps towards the goal. And then it's all doable, it's all seeable. As long as we have this big thing, I should be Buddha and I should be Buddha tomorrow and I'm a bad person if I'm not, then that distortion is so huge, there's no way to penetrate it to do the practice. And so, that's a laziness because it keeps us from even getting started. It seems so big, how could I possibly? I seem so irredeemable, how could I possibly? It seems so hard, how could we possibly? And all of that is dramatic. It's just drama. It's not true. It's not true. So practicing slowly, meditating on the gradual path, and for me, whenever I catch that, have some humility. Comes really clearly and strongly to recognize that I am just an ordinary sentient being. I'm an ordinary sentient being with Buddha nature. I'm an ordinary sentient being who has met the Buddha's path, an ordinary sentient being who has met a teacher and the teachings, an ordinary sentient being who has the capacity and the conditions to be able to do this practice. Is there any basis for discouragement here? No, really, none. The only obstacle is in my own mind. So have some humility about that and recognize that that's what I am, but it's not a just a sentient being. I'm just an ordinary sentient being. Not a superhero, not a bodhisattva yet, but the aspiration is there. And then, as Venerable said, when you see you can do something that you couldn't do before, rejoice. Rejoice. We're a little bit closer. And have some humility. Doesn't mean we're there, but it encourages us along the way. So if arrogance is your problem, I hope have some humility will help.